A lot of people think life begins when you're born or conceived or whatever other answers they're coming up with these days. For some people, though, life actually begins the day a doctor tells them that if they don't make some serious changes in their lives, they're going to die. You see, my life began the morning of my 41st birthday in January of 2019. I stood staring in the mirror, looking back on my life after stepping on the scale and finding out I was over 400 pounds for the second time in my life. You know, my dad died when I was 17. So my choice was plain to see in front of me. Either I take charge of my health, make the necessary changes to live, or do nothing and die knowing that my daughter, being only 6 years old, would spend the majority of her life calling some other man daddy. Can't you see? There's no one coming to save me in this moment. It was me who had to become the hero in my story. You know, we live in a world that has a system in place to remove all accountability from every decision we ever make. Taking accountability and fixing the problem is painful. It's like a journey through the pit of hell while feeling the pain of every lost soul that resides there. But in the end, the journey becomes the foundation of your testimony. My fight has become my calling. So if you're out there struggling and you hear the sound of my voice, I'm telling you that your story is not over. As long as you have breath in your lungs, there is still time. But it's your fight, your story, your moment to stand up and do what heroes do. It's a long road ahead, and it sucks. And maybe you're thinking you can't do it. But I'm here to tell you that you have all the tools you need. You always have, and you always will, because you are enough. And most of all, you are worth it. Nobody is more capable than you. Yeah, Friday! Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you may be listening. Thanks for making me part of your day. This is episode 258 of the Ranting Weight Watcher podcast. Well, I have no announcements today, so let's get into this! Journey updates. So, the week stats go from November 2nd to November 8th. In that time period, there were 83,528 steps taken. That's an average steps per day of 11,933 steps per day. Just a little over 35 miles walked and just about averaging 5 miles per day. On November 8th, I stepped on the scale to weigh 195.8 pounds. That is a 3-pound loss. Total pounds lost since January of 2019 is 199.8 pounds. Pounds remaining to get to the 200-pound weight loss goal, 0.2 pounds. Point 2 pounds. I have a lot to be thankful for on this journey, even though I'm not there yet. this result so far, even though this is not the end, this should have had its moment. It should have had the ability to be celebrated. But it didn't. And a big part of that is the events that took place just about a week ago. There were some layoffs in the corporation, and one of those layoffs being my coach, Sophie. It's pretty crazy to think about it. It shouldn't, I don't know. There are certain things, certain parts of me saying that it shouldn't affect me this much. But it does. It's almost as if there was a mourning period here. It's almost as if, when someone finds out someone dies, there's this whole back and forth of it can't be real. And you go through moments where you forget they found out they died. And then it's like you relearn it all over again, even though you already know it, if that makes any sense whatsoever. The last week has been very much like that for me. Going through these ups and downs. Almost like, hey, when I see Sophie on Saturday morning. And they're like, wait a minute. There is no more. There is no more. It sucks. This company is no longer the company it started out as. The woman, I don't even know her name, she'd be turning over in her grave seeing what has happened to it. And this happened in the recent years that I'm on Weight Watchers. So sometime between January in 2019 and sometime between when we got sent home because of COVID and the whole world got locked down. A subtle change happened. That change didn't seem like much. Oh, we don't call it Weight Watchers anymore. We call it WW. That was not just a name change. It was not just a rebrand. It was a complete transformation of a wellness company. In that moment also, it went from a franchise model to a global corporation. All of the franchises that were independently owned businesses became just another branch of the corporation. They were all bought out one at a time, systematically. Before this, I'm assuming it's before the rebrand that they had all of this in place, and then the rebrand happened. When a company becomes a corporation like this, and all of a sudden shareholders are involved, there's something you need to understand. At the moment that there are shareholders, and I think I said this before, but at the moment that there are shareholders, you are no longer the customer. You may want to believe it all you want. But you are no longer the customer. The shareholder is the customer. And what the shareholder says dictates how the company moves. Not you, the shareholder. Unfortunately, in this moment, you become the product. And as a member, a subscriber, you are a source of profit. Whether or not you succeed, you are a source of profit. Many things changed since that day. Many things changed. One of the biggest things I saw change, and many people still haven't even acknowledged it. Maybe I'm the only one who sees it. Maybe I see it and no one else wants to see it. Maybe I'm just the one willing to say it. But this company has gone from a wellness company to a company where you could feel like you're changing your life, but really what you're really doing is sitting in an endless cycle of mediocrity. If this company created true change, it would go out of business. Why? Because the people would leave. Because the real change, real transformation, how many times have I said this to you? Real transformation is going beyond what's taught to you here. Transforming your life, becoming the greatest version of yourself. You join this company, and how many times have you heard me say on this podcast, this company is a great beginning, but it's not an ending. A great beginning. It's a great start to anybody's journey. Hell, it got me to 150 pounds lost. But it took growth beyond the company's guidelines to get this far, 199.8 pounds. To get here, it took growth beyond the company's guidelines. And you have to be able to see that. These are not something that I can force you to see. You have to be able to see it. My desire to keep moving forward outweighed my loyalty to a company. I stayed at that 150-pound mark. I danced up and down within 10 pounds. So down to 145, up to 155, and going back and forth. I did that for nearly a year. 10 months, I was going back and forth. And it got to the point where I finally realized that I'm 10 months into this, and I'm not really going anywhere here. 10 months into this current year or whatever it is. So I decided that I was done messing around with things as I knew them, that there has to be more knowledge. And it just so happened that about a year before that, I purchased the book, but never actually opened it. And that book sat on my shelf for nearly a year. But it came time in that moment when I realized I had been in stagnation, in mediocrity for nearly a year, I decided it was time to open the book. You see, the corporation benefits from people who just keep doing what the corporation says. Because also in the corporation is the idea, the lie, that you can eat what you want and still lose weight. Everything's on the table. There are no sacrifices necessary. You do nothing but sacrifice from day one, first of all. People just don't see the things they're willing to do as sacrifices. They only see the stuff they're not willing to do as sacrifices. Everything you've done has been a sacrifice. On day one, when I walked in, the first thing I was sacrificing was my money. The second thing I was sacrificing was my time. A Saturday morning. For people who work 40 hours a week, Saturday morning is pretty valuable time. But I was sitting in a studio and I was willing to sacrifice that time. And you go on deciding what you want to do. But really what you're doing is deciding what to sacrifice. And hard lines are drawn. Hard lines are drawn by you. From beginning to current. There's lines drawn in the sand over and over again throughout the entirety of our journey. And that line represents what you're not willing to sacrifice in that given moment. That's the reality. What you're not willing to sacrifice. That's how you really paint this picture. Because there are sacrifices from day one, but because you're willing to do them, you don't see them as a sacrifice. But in actuality, you weren't investing that before, and you're investing it now, so it is a sacrifice. In the beginning, making sacrifices is easy because it's pushed by your motivation. But at some point, that motivation runs out. At some point, you become tired. At some point, you become bored. And then the real work comes. Because the real work is when it's no longer exciting, when there's no longer motivation, when you're bored out of your mind and everything looks tedious, is that you still show up, you still sacrifice, and you still do what you're told. Now, a lot of people start cutting corners here. Even though what they've done so far has created some success, things start slowing down, and now all of a sudden, knowing that things have slowed down, they decide, I'm bored. I don't feel like tracking anymore. I don't feel like weighing and measuring anymore. I don't feel like doing any of this. And naturally, a company run by shareholders, oh, it's okay. Just concentrate on one of the pillars, mediocrity. In other words, accept mediocrity while you feel this way. And when you could keep coming once a week and feel warm and fuzzy when you're done, and keep accepting mediocrity. Week after week after week, you never notice. Because every time something is said that might make you feel uncomfortable, somebody else says something to ease the discomfort. Someone like me sits in a workshop and says the truth, while someone else says the exact opposite, making sure you feel comfortable again. The reason I was so drawn to Sophie's workshops is she was one of the few that didn't immediately speak, undo everything I just said. Because, look, if you never feel uncomfortable, you're not challenging yourself. That's reality. That's truth. This whole thing, I look back at almost 7 years. Yesterday was 6 years, 10 months. Yesterday, November 12th. 6 years, 10 months. 2 months from now, I will be at the 7-year mark. 2 months from now. If you never get to the point that you're willing to go above and beyond, there will never be growth. There will never be, if you aren't continuously making yourself uncomfortable, growth will stagnate. Growth will stop eventually, and then you will have the choice. Accept mediocrity or become very uncomfortable very quickly. Most choose mediocrity because they're made to feel good in mediocrity. The entire system is designed to make sure you feel comfortable while you pay $45 a month. because you continually paying $45 a month and never actually getting to your goal just means profit to a shareholder. Especially for a company that has been struggling for how many years and starving for profit. And when things don't move fast enough, a shareholder says, we need to make this company more viable. So what's their answer? Cuts. Get rid of what, I don't care if it makes the customer or who is supposed to be the customer. I don't care if it makes them unhappy. At this point, they're going to stay whether they like it or not. And I'm not sitting here advocating for you to quit. So don't get that out of your head. If you have no place to go, it's like quitting without having another job. And if I wasn't so obsessed with seeing my app say minus 200, I probably would have quit. And I'm not telling you with that the thought is still in my, not still in my mind. That once it finally says minus 200, to be out of there. Because if you look at the things I do and you look at what's touted by the corporation as the method of way you do things, if you compare the two are so astronomically different, any one of you would say he's no longer on Weight Watchers. He's no longer doing the system as it was designed. Because I picked up a book. I read it. I implemented its theologies. Even though those theologies sent me so far past my daily point allotment, and then I started dropping weight. So explain that to me. When I started to implement the book's theology in my life, the scale started moving past the 150 mark, and I got to 160, 165, and I eventually hit the 175-pound charm. It was somewhere in that time period I received a diagnosis that caused me to make even more extreme changes. So people would say I was extreme just by reading the book. Especially because I was regularly having, at that time, before they made red meat 0, I was blowing past points just because of a diagnosis. I threw it all to the wind. I just was willing at that point. It was more important to me to not depend on Big Pharma to save my life. It was more important to me to try to eat a certain way. So to make it so that I never had to be dependent on Big Pharma. It was more important to do that than it was to keep points. And even though I was going past those points, like sometimes it was 40 points, sometimes 25 points past. But what happened in that time period was those extreme changes, those enormous sacrifices paved the way for a life where the diagnosis was no longer a problem and I was still dropping weight, even though I was going past points. And then WW made a move, creating red meat to be 0 points, certain versions of it or whatever it is, and then I was no longer blowing past points. But the time existed that I made these shift changes way before. And trusting a process. Do you know what kind of mind-blowing realization that is? To be 20 and 30 and 40 points over your daily allotment almost every day of the week, and to watch scale numbers go down? And to think to yourself, what the heck is going on? And the amount of faith that it took to make a change based on a book I read outside of what I had been taught to believe for God 5 years before that. Five years I had been practicing something a certain way. And then everything had to change because I was facing a diagnosis that I was going out of my way to battle nutritionally. I won that battle nutritionally because I decided I was willing to make the sacrifice. Even though a corporation says everything's on the table, I made the sacrifice. And what do I always tell you? What you do 97% of the time is what dictates the results. So did I walk from any food item away temporarily? Permanently? Did I walk? If I'm saying 97% is the number, that 3% of the time it doesn't matter, 97% of the time it does, does that mean I walked from anything particularly? No. Instead of once or twice a week, it became once a month that something like that happened. Maybe once every 2 months. Sacrifice. Sacrifice above and beyond what a corporation says is needed in the name of other things. And now you might say, I don't have that diagnosis. I don't need to do that. And yet, you could sit here and say, why is the scale not moving? Because really, you do need to make sacrifices above and beyond what the corporation says, and you're just avoiding it. And reality is, because of all of the endless information available to you, you're making a choice not to seek that information. Because that information might put the lie to everything else. And meanwhile, now you could sit here and now you could say, oh, my coach got laid off. I'm angry at this company. And now you could say, I can't go anywhere. I don't have a choice because you haven't grown beyond it. I have told you this. I can't even tell you how many times. I've told you this countless times. The object here is to outgrow the system. Outgrow. Every one of you should outgrow my message. Everyone in the sound of my voice should outgrow. Grow beyond what I tell you. And seek other information beyond me. Because what I have told you, you need more. You need more. You have outgrown me. The same thing with the corporation. You should be outgrowing that corporation, just like I did. Since the 150 charm, I have changed what I have made 1, 2, 3 extreme changes. Three changes, 3 enormous sacrifices that people would consider unnecessary. I have done in the last 50 pounds. From 150 to 200 here. Even though I'm not at 200 yet. In that 50 pounds, my eating habits have changed drastically. More times than in the rest of the journey at all. More times. Unlock Your Macrotype forced me to make a change because I had questions that were answered by the book, and then I decided to implement and make the sacrifices necessary. However much time later, I receive a diagnosis that requires me to suppress my immune system for the rest of my life on medication and make me dependent, essentially create a system where I could be affected by any sickness. And it would just take me out because I'm shutting down my immune system to battle it. Instead, I decide to make even more extreme changes. and I decide to adopt a carnivore lifestyle. And that carnivore lifestyle, done for however long, eliminated the need for pharmaceutical intervention of that autoimmune condition. And then finally, the adoption of multiple day fasting. Multiple day fasting. A lot of people confuse this with intermittent fasting. The difference between intermittent fasting and what I'm doing is people eat every day in intermittent fast. Every single day. I eat one day and I don't eat again for 2 or 3 or however many hours I decide that allotment is. I did this in the name of the possibility. It wasn't even a sure thing. It wasn't even a sure thing. I just thought, if fasting does this, maybe it will fix my leg. Because all of these benefits of multiple day water-only fasting, springing up something that triggers a self-healing mechanism in the body called autophagy, where the bad cells in your body start to get eaten by the good cells or refurbished, regenerated. So they're either repaired or eliminated by the other cells in your body. But the only way to achieve this is to be in a completely fasted state for multiple days. There are people shrinking cancer tumors. There are people reversing dementia with multiple day fasts. Cancer is on record as being like, at minimum, like 10-day fast. Eating nothing for 10 days, drinking only water for 10 days. And people are shrinking tumors. They don't want you to know that. If anyone ever starts to understand what a multiple day fast really does, you would put the medical industry out of business. And it's not until you actually do fast that you realize how much we don't need to eat and how much eating is a mental thing. But that adoption, in the name of the possibility, because of all of the weight I lost, my lymphedema in my right leg had changed very little. I was so small everywhere, but my right leg was enormous. And it wasn't changing much. I had looked back and I say, well, I gave up all carbs whatsoever just to beat this diagnosis. I changed my life drastically from the book I read. What's this? What's the difference? Even if it doesn't work, the benefits of fasting outweigh the risk. Every single one of those changes, I could probably tell that to if I ever had every WW member in one room and I said, these are the changes I made, if you make these same changes, they would call me extreme, out of my mind. They would say it's unnecessary and there's just no way possible. It's not sustainable. And yet here I am. Here I am. I have been fasting up to 72 hours a week for nearly 4 months. I did it for 8 weeks, a definite 72-hour fast, every week for 8 weeks. At the end of the 8 weeks, I gave myself leeway to decide each week how many hours it would be. Each week. Because I did that for the holiday season approaching. I wanted to have leniency in place that it didn't have to be a 72-hour fast right before Christmas or right before Thanksgiving. If it was only a 36-hour, fine. If it was only a 48-hour, fine. All of this driven by the dream, really, because that's really what it is. When I saw how many things were healed by fasting, I said, well, why not lymphedema? There is nothing anywhere written that fasting will help heal lymphedema. But there's plenty of evidence that fasting helps heal many things. So I pushed all my chips in the center of the table. I went all in and introduced fasting into my life. And everybody was like, what do you mean you're just not going to eat? What do you mean you're only drinking water? It started with 36 hours. 36 hours a week for 8 weeks. Then it went to 48 hours. 48 hours a week for 8 weeks. Then it went to 72 hours. 72 hours a week for 8 weeks. And now it's anything from 36 to 72 each week I decide. As I stand here right now, I'm approaching 48 hours. I'm approaching. It's 2 o'clock and I'm approaching 48-hour mark. 6:30 tonight will be my 48-hour mark. And I will go into tomorrow. And the mind plays all kinds of tricks. You know, I was going through day 1 and 2 when it was a 72-hour fast. Day 1 and 2 ended up being a breeze. But the minute I started giving myself leeway, day 1 and 2 became difficult. Oh, you could just, look, it could just be 24 hours this week. It could just be 36 hours this week. All of this done in the name of the possibility that lymphedema can be healed with zero guarantees. I bet on myself. I had a hunch. Let's give it a shot. Too bad I didn't think to measure my leg. I could definitely see there is a size difference. I just don't know how much of a change this is. That's what I don't know. It's sad that I didn't think to do that. But, oh well. It is what it is now. Can't go back. Can't change anything. Can't turn back time to go back to the beginning of fasting and measure my leg. But if I look at full body pictures, essentially almost naked, I could see a definite difference between the legs. The only question is how much of a difference. But that sparked weight loss in the process, right? It sparked weight loss further and got me this much further. The purpose when fasting was put into place was not weight loss. The purpose was healing. The purpose when I put carnivore into place had nothing to do with weight loss, had everything to do with healing. Because I recognize that a scale number doesn't necessarily mean healthy. Where the whole world seems to be fooled that if you are this certain weight, you are healthy. And on top of that, we have a generation of doctors that are like, yeah, you're okay at this weight. Here's a note saying you're healthy. And people are saying, well, if I'm happy at this weight, if losing 20 more pounds could turn you into someone who wasn't dependent on the doctor in the first place, if making certain changes that would seem extreme to all of your friends would make it so you only sat in a doctor's office by choice once a year, What kind of world would that be? What kind of world would that be? Instead, no, we choose to believe because the people with the white coats have the authority. They went to school. Meanwhile, you're surrounded by a system designed so that you grow up a certain way, you eat a certain way, you get sick a certain way. They blame everyone but you, and you die a certain way. Don't get it twisted. I understand. None of us gets out of this alive. I understand. But I'm not going to sit here believing all my life that something is genetic when really the only thing that's actually genetic is the behavior that causes everything that comes after it. Well, your family has a predisposition to diabetes. No, the behavior that causes diabetes is the predisposition. That's what's genetic. You were brought up to believe that there was a certain normalcy to eating a certain way. And that way promotes diabetes. That's the part that's genetic. Well, your family has high blood pressure. Stop eating sugar, and I'll bet you become the first member of your family that had high blood pressure that doesn't have it anymore. They have you looking at every other thing. They have you thinking cholesterol is a bad thing when your whole brain is made of it. Your entire brain is made of cholesterol. They want your cholesterol at a certain point, and they say, oh, you better take this medication and lower your cholesterol. Meanwhile, your brain is made out of, and we sit here and wonder why dementia is on an all-time high. Make those connections. Make it make sense. And we sit here dependent on systems, dependent on white coats, dependent on corporations that all work together in the broad scheme of things. All work together. Because you know what? This country and many other countries allow ingredients in the foods that cause a bunch of problems. And the biggest problem is that it causes an addiction. And you can't get enough of those foods. And they have you believe in those things are actually foods. And then you go and have a weight problem, and you go join a program, and that program tells you everything's on the table, it's okay. Never causing you to believe that sacrifice is necessary to become healthy. That becoming healthy is going to be the hardest thing you ever do in your life. They do everything to stop you believing that. Why? Because as long as you pay the membership, as long as you pay the copay, as long as you pay for the pharmaceutical, and as long as you keep buying the food, it's an endless cycle. Endless! And someone like me is deemed extreme. But go, by all means, remain dependent on the corporation that just laid off a bunch of your favorite people in the world. People you didn't know existed before this program. That's how they treated them. Like garbage on the side of the road. Let go. Released like dogs. Strays. We don't want to take care of you anymore. Just go take off. Remain dependent on that. That's a good idea. Remain dependent on part of the cog in the larger machine. And we're sitting here yelling at Congress, yelling at the Senate to change things? Why do they allow these ingredients in our food? Why do you buy the food? If the food wasn't purchased, would it be made? A company exists to sell you stuff because they desire your money more than they care about your health. That's the God's honest truth. And if you're talking about Republicans, Democrats, there's a reason they call them the left and the right. You have a left hand, you have a right hand. But they are all part of the same body. That's the part you can't see. All of these people arguing in that big white building, they're just left and right hands of one body. And wrestling is more real than the nonsense that goes in that white building. And if you're dependent on them to fix anything in your life, you're as foolish as you think. Or I should say you're as foolish as you look. Because they're invested in all those companies. They're invested on the companies that are the pharmaceuticals you're going to need when you eat this food and get sick this way. They're invested in them. How many years were you eating aspartame? Splenda has aspartame. It's good. It's perfectly healthy for you. And then it was classified as a carcinogen. And everybody's like, oh, don't eat aspartame. Make sure there's no aspartame in there. Meanwhile, in the process of you realizing it's a carcinogen, they legally changed the name. It's no longer called aspartame. It's called amino sweet. And it's still in a bunch of other foods, but you're not paying attention because it doesn't say aspartame anymore. And you're thinking, okay, this is all right. Do you see the endless cycle? This is why the sacrifice is necessary. Because you're going to go crazy chasing ingredients. Just eliminate them in their entirety. If you can't read them, get rid of them. If it's not growing out of the ground, if it's not part of an animal, if it doesn't come from an animal, sacrifice it or make it from scratch. Sacrifice it or make it from scratch. It is that necessary to become the greatest version of yourself. The greatest version of yourself not only achieves the scale result you dream of, it keeps it without any of the hang-ups you had when all of this started. You grow and outgrow the system that started your journey. And when something like this happens, something that you don't support, when you see people you love eliminated like dogs, you can be grown enough to say, I'm done. I'm done with this nonsense. Because I can depend on the knowledge I've obtained outside of this system now. And the real reason I was only here is because of my love for the people I've met in the process. And as long as I can maintain connection with them outside of this system, I can go on being the greatest version of myself. The question becomes, now at this point, how much longer do you allow yourself to live in mediocrity, making no sacrifices, complaining every step of the way about why you don't have the results you dream to have? And endlessly going in circles. I'm going to try this system. I'm going to try that system. All along, what you needed to do the entire time is to really think about What is it do I feel like I would be extremely uncomfortable letting go of? And none of it is permanent. You might let go of it completely for a time. But you might be able to come to it. Remember what I said, 97%. If you can get rid of and making these sacrifices 97% of the time, the other 3% won't matter. I can't do it, Don. I can't do it. I'm not strong enough. It doesn't have to be 97% tomorrow. It just has to be more than it is today, tomorrow. If you aren't willing, that's the problem. You decided all the sacrifices. Think about it for a second. How many sacrifices have you made so far? And I'm talking about all the ones you were willing to make. Your time, your money. Why don't you do the math right now? How many months have you been a paying member of a program? In total, over all of the years of your life. I'm not just talking about this time. I'm talking about every time. From the day you were born to the first one you joined until now. How much money was blown? And really, it was you avoiding the true sacrifice that's needed. In the Bible, we have to, in order to make it to heaven, we have to die to ourselves, pick up our cross, and follow him. If that's required to get to heaven, and you can't do it with just some simple food item that exists on this planet that makes you feel, so much joy when you eat it, you can't even give that up. How are you going to die to yourself for Christ to make it to heaven, to be in eternal glory, to be in the presence of God for all of eternity? How are you going to do that if you can't give up sugar? If you can't give up the simplest junk food? If you can't give up the simplest addiction you know you have? Even though all of the systems on this planet are telling it's quite okay to have emotional issues with food. How much longer? How much longer do you allow this before you realize it's stuff like this that's preparing you to be able to pick up your cross and make it to eternity in the presence of God? It's these stupid decisions that are preparing you for that one. Because the end of all of this is coming, whether we like it or not. And it's closer, whether we like it or not. And if you're still dealing with nonsensical things that you're addicted to, and you're unable to give those up, how on God's earth will you die to yourself, pick up your cross, and follow him? It's time to get serious. I love each and every one of you. God bless you all.